When you picture a global superpower going to war, your brain, it immediately cues up this Hollywood blockbuster, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Like you see the tanks rolling across the desert. The skies are just completely blacked out by advanced fighter jets.
Just this unstoppable machine.
Exactly. This perfectly calibrated machine asserting absolute dominance. But what if those tanks run completely out of gas in, like, 8 hours?
Right.
What if we are firing multi-million-dollar missiles 130 times faster than we can actually build them?
Yeah, that changes the picture completely.
It really does. So today's Deep Dives pulls from a pretty stark interview that, honestly, it completely shatters that whole blockbuster illusion.
It forces you to look past the CGI, right?
Mm-hmm.
And past the massive defense budget numbers and actually examine the plumbing.
The plumbing.
Like the supply lines, the assembly plants, the interest rates on the national debt.
Exactly. We're pulling from a recent YouTube interview.
Yep.
It features Colonel Doug Macgregor on the channel Daniel Davis Deep Dive. And the arguments they lay out, they suggest that the U.S. military and, by extension, the entire U.S. economy is facing this terrifyingly fragile reality.
Right, specifically in the context of a potential U.S.-Iran conflict.
Oh, yeah.
And before we get into the gears of this, it is crucial to set the stage for you, the listener.
Definitely.
Because the material we're examining today, it wades into some incredibly heavy geopolitical waters. And it contains, highly politically charged assertions.
Yeah, very much so.
So our objective today is not to endorse these viewpoints or take a side. We are just here to act as your guides.
Just looking at the info.
Right. To impartially unpack the math, the mechanics, and the underlying logic of the arguments presented by Macgregor and Davis, we just want to understand how they're constructing this warning.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand just how dire their warning is, we kind of have to start on the physical dirt of the battlefield.
The geography.
Yeah. Macgregor asserts right out of the gate that a Desert Storm 2, like a massive sweeping ground invasion like we saw back in 1991, he says it's mathematically and geographically impossible today.
Which is fascinating because he's directly countering the rhetoric you hear from figures like President Trump and Secretary Hegseth.
Right.
They frequently assert the U.S. is the unquestioned most powerful military force on Earth.
Now you hear that a lot.
But Macgregor's counter-argument is that overwhelming budgets do not automatically grant you overwhelming physical control anymore.
Because the operational environment has completely inverted over the last 30 years.
Exactly.
And he brings up this geographic reality check completely threw me. Like back in 91, the U.S. led coalition forces right into the Persian Gulf.
Right into it.
They just disembarked at ports like Al Jabiel in Saudi Arabia. It was essentially a straight shot to the theater of operations.
Super easy logistics, relatively speaking.
But today, Macgregor argues that trying to sail massive, slow-moving container ships or, modern robo-ships into the Persian Gulf, he says it would be an absolute death trap.
Because of the proliferation of Iranian coastal defense cruise missiles and anti-ship ballistic missiles, drone swarms. The Persian Gulf is a highly constricted body of water.
Right, it's basically a bottleneck.
Yeah, if you try to park a massive logistical vessel in there to offload tanks and troops, you are just a sitting duck.
Which means, according to the interview, the U.S. would have to establish its initial lodgment. The place where you drop off all the troops, the gear, the ammunition.
Yeah.
They had to drop it way over on the Red Sea. They mention a port city called Yanbu.
And that geographical shift, that is the linchpin of this whole logistical nightmare.
Why is that?
Well, Yanbu is roughly 1,000 kilometers away from the actual battle space.
1,000 kilometers. Wow.
Yeah.
So imagine planning the heaviest, most dangerous road trip in human history, right?
Yeah.
You have this entire armored division. But here is the catch.
The fuel.
The fuel. Your main battle tank, the M1 Abrams, it is powered by this gas-guzzling turbine engine.
It's essentially a jet engine strapped to a tank.
Literally. And the interview points out that even if you're utilizing auxiliary power units, these tanks run completely empty in about 7.5 to 8 hours of operation.
What's fascinating here is how the sheer mechanical reality dictates the overall strategy.
Yeah.
Because an 8-hour operational window means you push forward a couple 100 miles, and then what?
You're stuck.
The entire armored column grinds to a halt in the open desert.
Oh, man.
They are now totally exposed, just waiting for a massive fleet of thin-skinned fuel trucks to drive that same 1,000-kilometer route to refuel them.
And every single mile of that route is vulnerable to attack. It's not like they're just driving down an empty highway in the Midwest.
No, absolutely not.
You are protecting a massive fuel convoy from an adversary who has, cheap, long-range attack drones.
And Macgregor mentions that military leaders like Admiral Zofsky understood this severe logistical vulnerability. Right.
But the broader defense establishment has failed to adapt the overarching system. The force remains incredibly exposed, whether you are talking about the Middle East or even the vast battlefields in Ukraine.
So the illusion of invincibility has kind of masked a critical decay in basic logistics.
You cannot project power if you cannot move the fuel. It's that simple.
Right. So naturally you hear that, you think, okay, a ground invasion is a logistical nightmare.
Yeah.
So you just don't do it. We pivot.
We use the Air Force?
Exactly. We use our undisputed dominance in the air. We fight with advanced stealth bombers and precision missiles.
Makes sense on paper.
But here's where it gets really interesting, because the source material argues the math in the air is actually worse than the math on the ground.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Because it shifts from a fuel logistics problem to a profound manufacturing problem.
Right.
We have to look at the consumption rate versus the production rate of our most advanced weapons.
And the raw numbers they pull up are genuinely staggering. Let's look at the Patriot missile system.
The gold standard of U.S. air defense.
Exactly. So the interviewer, Daniel Davis, highlights some math regarding recent operations. During just a 4-day window of operations, coalition forces were expending roughly 225 Patriot interceptor rounds per day.
225 a day, just to shoot down incoming threats.
Right. Now compare that, 225 a day, to what we can actually build.
Yeah, this is the scary part.
The U.S. production rate coming out of Lockheed's facilities is about 1.7 Patriot missiles per day.
1.7.
Hold on, I really want to isolate that for you. We're firing 225 a day and building 1.7.
That is a consumption ratio of 132 to 1.
If the math is 132 to 1, how is that a viable strategy for more than, like, a week?
It isn't.
It's like trying to bail out a sinking ship with a teaspoon while the water just pours through a cannon hole. Every single day of conflict burned through over 100 days of complex manufacturing.
And this is where we have to explain why that production rate is so low.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, why can't we just build more?
Because we aren't building Model T Fords here. You can't just slap a Patriot missile together on a standard assembly line.
Right.
They require incredibly complex guidance systems, rare earth minerals, specialized rocket motors, and a highly skilled workforce that takes years to train.
They're boutique.
Exactly. Today's defense contractors operate more like artisanal watchmakers than mass production factories.
Which makes sense for the technology, but man, it creates a strategic trap.
It does.
The interview references analysts like Alex Vershinin and Harry Kazianis to point out that the U.S. has stumbled into an industrial war of missiles and unmanned systems.
Yeah.
But we were fighting it with a boutique manufacturing base.
Exactly. We're relying on highly complex interceptors that cost millions of dollars and take months to build.
Just to shoot down relatively cheap, mass-produced Iranian Shahed drones.
Right, which cost a few $1,000s and can be churned out by the dozens every single day.
That math is brutal.
You don't even need to be defeated in a pitched battle. The adversary just waits for you to run out of interceptors.
And the bombing campaigns aren't stopping the production of those cheap drones either.
Not at all.
The interview notes that despite 12 consecutive nights of American strikes in the region, Iranian missiles and drones are still reaching targets in places like Kuwait, Bahrain, and Jordan.
Yeah, there's even a Washington Post intelligence assessment they cited that concluded the bombing won't move Tehran's calculus at all.
Wow.
And this brings up a really sharp historical contrast Macgregor makes. During World War II, the U.S. government had massive industrial surge capacity.
Right. We were the arsenal of democracy.
Exactly. They could partner with someone like Henry Ford, retool existing massive auto plants, and literally build a mile-long assembly line to churn out thousands of aircraft almost overnight.
Right.
But today, contractors like Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, and Lockheed simply do not have that underlying adaptable manufacturing base to surge production.
They can't just flip a switch and make 50 Patriots a day.
No. But conversely, the source points to Russia's actions in 2022. When they realized the true scale of the attrition in Ukraine, they successfully pivoted their scientific industrial base to rapidly turn out massive quantities of artillery and missiles.
So they adapted.
Yes. The warning here is that having the most advanced technology in the world is useless if you don't have the industrial base to mass produce it when a conflict drags on.
Okay, so let me make sure I'm following this architecture. We have a ground invasion scenario that is geographically paralyzed by fuel constraints.
Yes.
We have an air defense strategy that is literally eating itself alive mathematically at a ratio of 132 to 1.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean? If the generals and the politicians have access to this exact same math, why are leaders like General Jack Keane, who is mentioned in the interview, allegedly pushing for major combat operations?
Well, according to the source material, the answer lies in a profound disconnect on Capitol Hill.
A disconnect.
Yeah, it's described as a combination of foreign lobbying and a fundamental misunderstanding of what modern warfare actually requires.
The interview paints this really vivid picture of a Congress completely obsessed with glitz and glamour.
Yeah, the optics.
The claim is that politicians see a videotape of a massive explosion from a precision strike, and they confuse that visual spectacle with an actual war-winning strategic effect.
They're hunting for a silver bullet to end a conflict quickly.
Right, without understanding the grueling industrial reality we just talked about.
And they equate the sheer size of the defense budget directly with capability. They look at this massive pile of money, which, by the way, the interview notes, is deceptively presented to the public as $1.15 trillion.
Wait, deceptively?
Yeah, they claim it's actually closer to $1.5 trillion when you add in all the hidden components.
Wow, okay.
And they assume that mountain of cash just automatically guarantees victory.
But Macgregor pushes this into highly controversial territory here.
He really does.
He makes the politically charged assertion that a potential conflict with Iran is not actually about United States interests at all.
Right. And again, we're just reporting his claims here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He argues that Iran has never been an existential threat to the U.S. and that the push for war is entirely driven by Israel's interests.
Yes.
And what he characterizes as Zionist billionaires and powerful lobbyists in Washington.
To understand his argument here, we kind of have to look at the history he points to.
Okay, let's look at it.
He argues that the U.S. establishment intentionally ignores its own historical complicity in the region just to justify new conflicts.
Right.
He brings up the Iran-Iraq War, pointing out that the United States actively equipped Saddam Hussein long before making him an enemy.
Yeah, that conflict resulted in 500,000 to 700,000 dead Iranians.
And his assertion is that this historical trauma is just conveniently forgotten by politicians who are pushing for a new war today.
The interview also dives into very specific legislative actions to back up this claim of foreign influence.
Oh, yeah, the Defense Authorization Bill.
Yeah, they discussed this new Defense Authorization Bill. The assertion here is that this bill legally integrates U.S. and Israeli military and technological development to an unprecedented degree.
Yes. And they bring in a quote from Larry Wilkerson, who suggests this integration effectively legalizes the actions of Jonathan Pollard.
Remind us who that is.
Pollard was the American intelligence analyst sentenced to life in prison back in the 1980s for passing highly classified information to Israel. So the implication the source is making is that what was once prosecuted as treason is now being actively legislated as standard operating policy.
And this is where they bring in Tucker Carlson.
Right.
He's quoted calling the merging of 19 U.S. intelligence agencies with Mossad a humiliation ritual.
Strong words.
Yeah. He points out that nearly all Republicans, except for Thomas Massie and 7 others, and half of the Democrats, voted for this integration.
Wow.
The interview even goes so far as to describe political figures like Mike Huckabee as Israeli mouthpieces.
No, wait. Integrating 19 separate U.S. intelligence agencies with a foreign intelligence service.
Right. I was thinking the exact same thing. How is that even structurally possible without completely compromising internal compartmentalization and security?
If we connect this to the bigger picture Macgregor is painting, he describes Washington not as a place of grand strategy, but as an enormous mountain of cash.
Just a pile of money.
Yeah. He argues that politicians just want to dig their hands into that cash before they retire or get voted out.
Okay.
He asserts that the financial kickbacks and campaign contributions from lobbyists are so overwhelming that they intentionally blind decision makers to the real-world consequences of proliferating sensitive U.S. technology.
And to really drive home how unusual this is, he draws a sharp historical contrast.
Right.
He points out that during World War II, the U.S. didn't even share intelligence at this deep level with the British, and they were our absolute closest allies.
Yeah, that puts it in perspective.
He does mention, interestingly, that FDR secretly authorized sending enriched uranium and plutonium to the Soviets through Harry Hopkins.
Interesting.
But his broader point stands. This level of institutional integration with a foreign power is, in his view, unprecedented and highly dangerous for U.S. sovereignty.
So the overarching architecture of this argument is that alleged greed and political subservience are driving the U.S. military toward a conflict it mathematically cannot sustain.
Right.
For reasons that completely bypass the benefit or safety of the American public.
Which brings us to the final and, frankly, the most sobering part of this deep dive.
The economy.
Because this political disconnect, this $1.5 trillion budget, and these logistical failures, they don't just stay neatly contained in the halls of Washington or the deserts of the Middle East.
No, they definitely don't.
They create a ripple effect that crashes directly into your wallet. It hits your mortgage rates, your grocery bills, and the global economy.
The vulnerabilities we've discussed on the battlefield are intimately tied to global energy markets.
Right.
And to the stability of the U.S. financial system itself.
Let's start with oil. The source points out that despite U.S. Central Command frequently claiming the Strait of Hormuz is open and secure,
Yeah.
the practical reality on the water is totally different. The flow of commercial trade is severely restricted due to the threat of attack.
And that restriction is causing a massive hidden spike in oil prices.
Exactly.
They make a very critical distinction here that we really need to explain. The difference between the paper price and the spot price of oil.
Yeah, this was a massive aha moment for me.
Oh, for sure.
Because you look at the stock ticker on the news, and the paper price, which is basically Wall Street traders betting on futures contracts for months from now.
Right, the speculative price.
Yeah, that might be hovering around $100 a barrel,
Mm-hmm.
but the actual physical spot price, the price you have to pay today to put actual liquid oil into a physical tanker,
What's that sitting at?
it's sitting at $140.
Wow.
And the source predicts it will hit $150 within 30 days.
This raises an important question. Why does that matter to you?
Right.
Because economic activity is fundamentally based on energy.
Hmm.
The cost to harvest wheat, manufacture a car, or, run a data center, it all traces back to the cost of energy.
Everything.
If the physical price of oil spikes to $140 or $150 a barrel, the cost of all economic output rises commensurately. Inflation skyrockets. Everything you buy gets exponentially more expensive overnight.
But I have to push back a little here.
Yeah.
Is the U.S. dollar really that fragile?
Well,
We've seen regional conflicts and oil spikes before. Could a shift in oil prices in the Persian Gulf actually dethrone the dollar? Or is this just the absolute worst-case doom-scrolling scenario?
the source material leans heavily toward this worst-case scenario becoming a reality.
Okay.
But not just because of oil, it's because the oil shock is colliding with the U.S. debt crisis. They point out a specific metric, the 10-year Treasury interest rate. When the U.S. government needs money beyond what it collects in taxes, it issues debt in the form of Treasury bonds.
Right. Investors buy these bonds and the U.S. pays them interest.
Exactly. The argument is that if the interest rate on the 10-year Treasury hits 5%, the math of the U.S. government fundamentally breaks.
Because at 5%, the amount of money the U.S. has to pay just to service the interest on the national debt, it would surpass the entire massive $1.5 trillion defense budget we just talked about.
Yes, you are borrowing money just to pay the interest on the money you already borrowed.
That's insane.
Macgregor points out that the modern American economy is entirely built on leverage, on cheap energy and cheap credit.
Yeah.
As the U.S. financial position weakens, that cheap credit dries up. If you take an economy built on leverage and suddenly remove access to cheap credit, you are looking at a potential crash of the entire financial system.
Mortgages become unaffordable, small businesses can't get loans to make payroll, corporate debt defaults cascade.
Exactly.
And while all this math is breaking down internally, the interview highlights a massive external threat happening at the exact same time.
De-dollarization.
Yes. For decades, the U.S. has relied on the petrodollar system. Countries bought oil in U.S. dollars and then recycled those dollars by buying U.S. Treasury debt.
Which kept our interest rates artificially low.
Right. But Macgregor claims that trust is breaking. No one wants to buy U.S. debt anymore.
Meanwhile, geopolitical adversaries are making incredibly strategic moves to capitalize on this.
Like China.
Right. The source points out that China is actively moving toward a gold-backed currency, the yuan. They aren't just talking about it. They're opening physical vaults in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and Hong Kong.
Wait, vaults in Riyadh. So they are setting up the infrastructure to allow oil-producing nations to trade energy directly for gold.
Bypassing the US dollar entirely.
Wow.
Precisely. Countries are walking away from the dollar because they no longer see it as a stable, long-term store of value.
Especially if they see the U.S. mathematically trapped by its own debt and struggling to maintain military dominance.
Exactly.
So you have this perfect storm brewing. Synthesizing Macgregor's ultimate warning here, we're looking at an unprecedented double threat.
Yeah.
On one side, you have a military and strategic failure in the Persian Gulf, caused by outdated logistics, gas-guzzling tanks, and a depleted industrial base that can't build missiles fast enough.
And on the other side, matched perfectly in timing, you have a financial and economic collapse at home.
Right.
Triggered by insurmountable debt, skyrocketing energy costs, and the loss of the dollar's global dominance.
He calls it the worst set of circumstances for any great power in the history of mankind.
It's the danger of doubling down on a flawed, mathematically impossible military strategy while completely ignoring the critical realities of supply chains and shifting global economics.
It is a stark reminder that military might in the 21st century isn't just about the budget size or the political bravado in Washington.
Not anymore.
It is about the very unglamorous, brutal realities of fuel consumption rates, artisanal assembly lines, and treasury bond interest rates.
Which leaves us with this final thought for you to chew on.
Yeah.
If traditional superpowers can be paralyzed on the battlefield by relatively cheap, mass-produced drone technology,
Right.
and if they can be outmaneuvered in the financial sector by shifting currency alliances and gold vaults,
How will we even define a global superpower a decade from now?
will it still be measured by the number of multi-billion-dollar aircraft carriers you have floating in the ocean?
Or will it be measured by industrial assembly lines, access to raw resources, and the sheer ability to manufacture at scale when the Hollywood blockbuster script gets thrown out the window?
It seems the era of unquestioned military might is over.
Replaced by a much more complicated, mathematically unforgiving reality. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning those surface-level narratives, keep doing the math, and we will catch you next time.